Wonderful. Thank you, and welcome to Littleton Church of Christ this morning. I am Tony Brizendine. My family and I have been serving and worshiping here for just over 3 years. And today I've had the honor and the privilege of being able to fill in for Joe Vaughn. When he called me, he said, "Hey, can you fill in for me?" I was like, "Are you sure? You know what you're getting yourself into?" I mean, so this is my second sermon that I've ever given. So you'll just have to bear with my limited preaching ability. So it looks like for at least the next 30 minutes, we're stuck with each other for now. What are you going to do? All right, let's go to God in prayer. Dear Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this community. Thank you for these awesome people, Father, that we get to serve and worship with. Father, may something that be said today be for the betterment of someone's journey, Father, and on their path, Father. It's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen. Amen. So in keeping with the what's next theme, I wanted to share some verses in my own personal stories in a sermon titled, "What Happens When God's Promise Doesn't Quite Meet Your Expectation?" You're given the promise, but it doesn't look like what you thought it would look. So we'll start in the second chapter of Exodus with the birth of Moses. And at the time in Egypt, to give some context, the Israelis had grown in population, and the Egyptian Pharaoh was concerned about the Israelis possibly rising up and overthrowing him and his government. So if we read in Exodus 2, 1 through 4, "Now a man of the tribe of Levite married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him anymore, she got a papyrus basket for him, coated it with tar and pitch. She placed the child in it and put him among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him." So take a step back and think about that scene and imagine what's going on here. You think about how important children were in that day and time, and they still are important today, of course. But imagine a family having to give up their firstborn son, hide him, and give him up. Not just give him away. You're sending your greatest blessing, your greatest treasure, and you're sending it into a place infested with danger and crocodiles. For some of you, maybe that looks like sending a child away to a faraway school, sending a child off to the military, sending your child off to the mission field. Perhaps it's letting go of a relationship that was supposed to be a blessing to you, letting go of a job. And now you face the jungle, the crocodiles of uncertainty, loneliness, unemployment. Moses' mom had to face that. Because, as you look at this story, the Egyptians were literally climbing in your windows. They snatching your people up. Hide your kids, hide your wife time, tough times. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that's an old YouTube viral video. You can go look it up later. But that doesn't look like God's promise, right? You have the promised child and he's hidden and he's given away. So if we read a little bit further, if we go into Exodus 2, 5 through 10, we see another part of the story. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank, and they saw the basket among the reeds, and they sent her female slave to get it. And she opened it, and she saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. And when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son named Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." The child that was the blessing, he was covered up, hidden. He was on the hit list. He was supposed to be murdered by Pharaoh's order. And now he's invited to live in the palace. Live in the palace rent-free, nursed by his own mother. You know what that sounds like to me when I read that? You were supposed to be bankrupt, but now I'm giving you the house. You were supposed to be expelled from school, but your tuition has been paid in full. You were supposed to be in prison, but the judge struck down the sentence. You were supposed to be unemployed, but you got a promotion with a bonus. When our expectations don't line up with God's promises. Isn't it amazing how God works? You know, about 10 years ago, and as most of you know, I work in the IT field. The IT field can be extremely volatile with, ebbs and flows, employment, unemployment. One week you're employed, you're on top of the world, you're getting a bonus, and the next week you're unemployed. So we rewind the clock back to 2015. Brenda and I were just recently married, and we had just sold my condo down in Colorado Springs, and we're living in my parents' basement. We were in the process of having a home built when Brenda told me, "Hey, guess what? We're going to have somebody else moving in the house with us." I was like, "Great. What are we going to do? We just put in the contract on the house." That's great. A few months later, though, I was informed that, hey, your position will be eliminated because the company had a terrible quarter. So we had the promise of this family, and we had the promise that God is always going to look out for us and take care of us. But this didn't look like the promise, and it surely was not meeting my expectations. But you know what? In that time, after my daughter was born, we're still living in the basement, and I was kind of upset about the whole situation. But if you ask my own father about that, he'd probably say that that was one of the happiest times of his life because he had his entire family under one roof. He got to look after me, my wife, my new baby, my mom as well. Even my little sister was able to contribute. And so a few weeks after my daughter was born, I actually got a call from a former boss of mine saying, "Hey, man, we got a new opening. I thought about you." And so I went and did the interview. I was half tired because I was on the night shift watching Carol Ann. That was probably one of the worst interviews I've ever done, but for whatever reason, they thought enough to hire me. So I got a call one morning while I was half out of it. "Hey, man, you got the job." "Okay." And fortunately for me, the guy that was hiring me knew what state I was in. He was like, okay, I understand where you're at. I'll give you a call later today. We'll talk about the details. You can go back to sleep now. Again, amazing how God works sometimes, how he brings the promise, even though we have our unfulfilled expectations, right? So if we read a little bit further, in Exodus 2, 11 through 12, we get another part of the story. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that way and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So our man was looking around to see if anybody was looking. He took homeboy out and was like, "Yeah, I'm going to put him in the sand. And nobody's going to notice, right?" He tried to do things his own way. So Moses, one of the chosen people, a person destined to free his people of their long-suffering captivity, at the hands of the Egyptians. Moses thought he could do things his own way, meet his own expectations. But this wasn't the way that God had for freeing his people. How many things do you think we've done on our own, in our own way, and it wasn't the way that God had for us? When we try to meet our own expectations. But in God's grace and mercy, he always seems to provide a way back from where we deviated. And when we go back to the story of Moses, we find him years later, as a result of what he did, in exile, hidden in the wilderness, at the age of 80. Now you think about that for a second. Think about this again. If you're feeling sad because you don't feel like you have your life together, my man was 80 before he got it together, before he stepped into his promise. There's still hope for you. So in Exodus 3, God appears to Moses as a burning bush and begins a dialogue with Moses about hearing the suffering of God's people, and he gives Moses his mission. So in Exodus chapter 3, 16 through 21, he tells Moses, he says, "Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivitites, and Jebusites, into a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders will listen to you." Remember that part. The elders will listen to you. "Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, Lord, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike down the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. And after that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards his people so that when you leave, you will not leave empty-handed." So now we see where Moses tried to do things on his own way. And we see how that turned out. Now God is speaking to Moses and telling him, bruh, this is how it's going down. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to assemble your team, assemble your crew. And you're going to go to Pharaoh and ask him for a 3-day journey into the wilderness. So he tells him straight up, this is what's going to happen. But how does Moses respond? Let's read. Exodus 4, 1 through 3. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me and say, Lord, the Lord did not appear to you?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." And Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. So in the presence of God, Moses receives his instructions, his blessing. And how does he respond? He made excuses and he doubted. And God even told him, remember that part I said, where he said the elders of Israel were listening to you? And he comes back and he says, well, what if they don't listen to me? He doubted. But has God ever answered a prayer in your life, something that you really wanted, and you made excuses and you doubted? God showed you an opportunity. Maybe it was a new job or a business idea, perhaps an idea for a ministry, something that you long prayed for, and you doubt it. Could it be that maybe your expectations didn't line up with God's promise? I wish that I could say that I did not doubt when I received a blessing, but I can't. Some of you know my wife, Brenda, and know that she is a native of Guatemala. And I've shared with some of you her story of how she emigrated here to the United States. And I wish that I could say that throughout that process I was stoned, that I was, oh yeah, I'm with it. No, there were parts where I doubted. There are parts where I was like, I don't know how we're going to make this happen. We love each other. We received the promise. But it doesn't look like what we thought this would look like. So if you rewind the clock back again, and by the way, this story is Brenda approved. I already got her okay to tell this version of it, which I think is the best version. But if we rewind the clock back to, I'll never forget the day, Friday, June 3rd, 2011, Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was a single man working for a local ministry, living on my own. And the job that I had at the time, working in IT, was a dream for me because I'd always wanted to work for this ministry even since I was in college. But as the years passed, it seemed like things kind of got stale, right? It wasn't what I expected. So much to the point that I was thinking about leaving. I was like, well, this really isn't working out. It's kind of repetitive. I'm not really growing. I didn't meet anybody yet. Nothing's really happening. But Friday, June 3rd was different. On that particular day, I was late for work for one, but I left my wallet behind in my home. And I raced off to work. And as soon as I got to work, I realized I had no money, which means that I had nothing for lunch. So during my lunch break, I had to race back home, collect my wallet. I drove through one of my favorite fast food places, Chick-fil-A, of course. But for whatever reason, the line this morning took longer. It took me longer to get back to work. And by the time I returned to work, all my coworkers were gone in a company-wide meeting. So I was left alone at my desk. So I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to go through email. And I'm going to catch up on things that I should have done before, right? But God. So as I'm working, all my coworkers are gone in this other meeting, and of course I wasn't going to show up late, so I'm just sitting there. A coworker of mine comes to my desk and saying, hey, I was working on this project with one of your colleagues in IT, and I still need help with it. Is he available? And I said, no, everybody else is in a meeting right now. Is there anything that I can do to help you? And she said, no, I really need your colleague's help on this. And so I said, okay. However, at that point, at that moment in time, I stopped paying attention to my coworker. And I couldn't get my eyes off the lady standing next to her. And so I'm just staring at her, and I'm going like, wow, she's gorgeous. I don't know what I should say to her. Like, I need to say something. And so the best I could do was I walked up and I just introduced myself. I said, hi, my name's Tony. If you need, I first asked her, are you new here? And she said, no, my name is Brenda, and I'm from the Guatemala office. And I said, well, Brenda, if you ever need, I didn't say it like that. I said, if you ever need any IT support, I'm your guy. I'm right here. Anything IT related, I can help. And she said, well, no, I have my own team back at home. And so we kind of finished our conversation and they left. And then I later tracked down my coworker who was with Brenda at the time, kind of escorting her around the building. I said, who is that? And she said, she's Brenda. She's from the Guatemala office. And I was like, hey, what do you know about her? Do you know if she's single or anything? And so she said, let me check my sources. And so she emailed Brenda's staff, her coworkers down in the Guatemala office, and they gave me the green light to proceed. They said, no. And so my coworker came back to me and said, hey, it's Friday afternoon. Brenda will be back home by Monday. So on Monday, send her an email. And so when I sent her that first email, it started a conversation that continues today. We've continued sending messages back and forth over company resources, IMing one another. And it seemed like we were starting to build a pretty awesome relationship, right? We started to get to know each other, and then back in 2011, they had this software called Skype that was pretty new. And so after emailing each other during the day, we found ourselves Skyping at night, over dinner, over the weekends. And so my thought was like, God, wow, this is awesome, but how is this going to be realistic? I mean, we live 2,000 miles apart. How am I ever going to see her? I mean, you have to remember, this is single man on ministry salary time. We don't have that kind of budget for travel. But God had an answer to my doubt around how I could afford travel to see Brenda. And this is what I would call, and God rest his soul, my Billy Mays moment from God. He literally said, but Tony, wait, there's more. Don't give up hope yet, there's more. Because as all this was going on, we're emailing each other. Another coworker of mine was leaving his old position because he took a different role somewhere else. And he said, hey man, we had done some work together before on another project. And he said, hey, I think you would be great to fill my role that I'm leaving behind. And so I applied for his role and wound up getting the job. To my surprise, I didn't think I had a shot. And you see how my faith is going. It's like, man, I don't have a shot at this. Man, I can't do this. But God, he kept coming through each and every time with a wait, there's more. And I hope for all of you that God will always answer your doubt with a Billy Mays, wait, there's more. As our relationship grew and we started visiting each other, now I have money to fly back and forth. We got to know each other's families. She got to know mine. I got to fly down and meet her family. And we really started liking each other. And by the following year, over Thanksgiving, and to put it into football terms, I knew that I had to go on her turf to propose to her. So I flew down with a ring on her turf with the help of my now brother-in-law and asked her, I said, Brenda, I'd like you to come back to the United States with me so that we can start a life together. This is great, right? We have the promise, right? God had always put it on my heart that I wanted to be a husband and a father someday. But as we started discussing what this was going to entail, because it isn't just us, now we have to involve two different governments. And for those of you wondering, immigration is not the easiest thing in the world. And as Brenda and I started talking and discussing amongst one another, we're going to have to get lawyers involved. We're going to have to get money involved. And I thought and again, this is where I faltered and I doubted. And I said, God, I don't know lawyers. I don't have money for that. Ain't nobody got money for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. I got bronchitis. That's another YouTube reference. You can look that up. But I mean, it was hard for me to picture this. Like, how are we going to manage two different countries, lawyers and fees and all kinds of stuff? And I kid you not, literally a week later, a gentleman came by my desk and said, hey, I understand you have a relationship with Brenda and you guys are getting serious. I have the name of a lawyer that knows how to help with matters of these things. And I had wonderful parents and a supportive family that said, hey, we've met Brenda and we love her and we're willing to help you cover the fees. God came through again. And this part of my story really, I feel like it speaks to me through Exodus 3, verse 21, where it talked about not leaving his people empty-handed. God will always provide where he needs to provide. So I proposed at the end of 2012 over Thanksgiving. We started our immigration process in January the following year of 2013. We put a date on a calendar in faith, saying that we believe that God is going to provide us passage so that Brenda can come here to the United States. So we put our faith on the line and we said, okay, we think that September we'll have everything we need. So in those months that followed January, we submitted tons of paperwork, made payments to the lawyer. I mean, and I can, if any of you are interested, I can show you the stack of evidence that we had to send to our lawyers. It was literally this thick. And it was of text messages, airline tickets, our correspondence, statements from our friends about our relationship. And you know that we got down to August 21st, exactly 1 month before our wedding date, and Brenda received her paperwork so she could come here to the United States. Wedding invitations had already been sent, the venue had already been set up, and we were waiting up until a month before the wedding before we were 100% sure that we could make this work. God answered my doubts, and he fulfilled his promise. It didn't look like what either of us had expected out of life, but he still fulfilled his promise. So where does that leave us? We see that things worked out also for the children of Israel in the end. But what do we do when we're faced with God's promises not meeting our expectations? I have a few points that I'd like to share with you that helped me throughout my journey of when I doubted, of when I was scared. And I especially want to share this with our younger people, because you're going to be joining the real world soon, as they say. And a lot of people already have expectations for you in your life, and maybe you have them for yourself. However, I want to challenge that, because your journey is going to be uniquely yours and yours alone. And it would be robbing yourself if you're comparing it to anyone else. I really wish that somebody had shared these things with me when I was in high school, college age. I've seen far too many people, some of my friends, grow bitter and depressed over unmet expectations. So I'd like to share with you the 5 points that really helped me through my journey. Number 1, I would say, pray with purpose. Pray with purpose. And when you pray, don't be afraid to be real with God about what's going on in your heart. Moses spent a lot of time alone with God, connecting with him, and that can't be underestimated. One of the things that helped me was joining a prayer group. I joined a prayer group of about 10 other young men. This was about 2 years before I met Brenda. And we all had it on our hearts that we wanted to be men of God, and we wanted to be godly spouses and godly fathers. And we would meet weekly to pray with one another, pray with us through our challenges. And you know that I've actually lost touch with many of them, but out of the dozen or so men that I prayed with them, just about every single one, God spoke, God answered their prayers, and they have beautiful stories to share of their own. So pray with purpose. Number 2, be grateful. Don't lose sight of what you have in your life, because it becomes very easy to be discouraged about what didn't work out instead of being grateful. If you read later on in the book of Exodus, it describes how the Israelis were walking through the desert with Moses after their escape from Egypt, and how ungrateful their hearts were. They complained against Moses, and they complained against God. They even said it would be better that we had remained in bondage in Egypt. Now think about that. It's better that you remained in slavery than being alone with God. And as a result, God swallowed up many of them into the earth, and serpents attacked them. So remember, it's okay to vent, because you're going to hit points where things don't work and you're frustrated, and it's okay to vent. But always remember what you're grateful for. Always remember the good. Your words have power. Use them carefully. Number 3, I would say take courage. Remember that part about receiving the blessing and being doubtful, and Moses running away from his own staff? Don't be afraid of something that might take you out of your comfort zone and stretch you a bit. The best growth I've ever seen has come when we're not comfortable. Remember, it took courage for a mother to place her baby in the Nile River amongst crocodiles. It took courage for a man who stuttered to speak in front of a king. Most theologians believe that Moses had a stuttering problem, or Bible scholars believe he had a stuttering problem. It's going to take courage for you to step into your own dream, right? Number 4, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to grieve when things don't work out. Remember, God grieves with us as he grieved with the children of Israel. He even said that to Moses. And number 5, never give up hope. Never give up on your dreams. God put them on your heart for a reason. You may have had to lay your dreams down in the Nile, but God's not done with you yet. You may have done something you shouldn't have, like Moses, but God's not done with you yet. You might be 80 years old, but God is not done with you yet. You might be suffering through a stuttering problem or a mental illness, but God is not done with you yet. Your dream may look impossible, but God isn't done with you yet. As I close, I just want to leave you with this. Christ was not what the people expected. People expected a king that would forcibly free them from the oppression of Rome, not a man from Bethlehem. They expected a king who would raise an army and lead them to glory, not a man talking in parables and hanging out with controversial characters. Could it be that our calling is to be more like Christ instead of what we expect or what others expect? Live in the promise, not the expectations. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. It's been an honor, and I really hope that the things that I've shared with you will help you along your journey to reach high, wide, and deep. So this week and today, go forth, love God, love others. Thank you. Amen.